GamingBolt presents 15 video game bosses so bad they deserve to be demoted instead. Boss fights can be difficult to design, especially since they need to challenge the player without being overwhelmingly impossible to defeat. It doesn't always work out, and sometimes you have bosses so laughably easy to beat that they'd be better off as regular enemies. Let's take a look at 15 such bosses who have been long overdue for a demotion. PINWHEEL, Dark Souls. Though it ultimately depends on the route the players take, PINWHEEL can be a big pushover since you've adequately leveled up at this point. The hilarious part is how PINWHEEL isn't even all that tough after the sheer torture that is the catacombs. Having some of the lowest health of all of the bosses in the game also doesn't help. The fact that he's not the only pushover boss in Dark Souls is also pretty funny, we suppose. LAMBENT BRUMAK, Gears of War 2. After the boss fight with Scourge, the actual final battle in Gears of War 2 is a LAMBENT BRUMAK. The fight is so embarrassingly easy that you only need to focus the Hammer of Dawn on it until it dies. Even the LAMBENT Zerker in Gears of War 3 is tickled by this before trying to murder you. The fact that the LAMBENT BRUMAK closed out Gears of War 2 as a boss is pretty disappointing. ARKHAM Knight, Batman Arkham Knight. Spoilers. First off, this isn't just some run-of-the-mill baddie. This is Jason Todd, a former Robin and one who's fought on par with Batman in many different stories. Even if the Arkham Knight isn't as good as the Dark Knight, why did this boss battle make him look like such a wuss? He hangs back sniping while you execute takedowns, ghosting past mooks in the process. Then he eventually becomes a good guy. Alright, you do you, Jason. Mysterio, Spider-Man 2. You wouldn't expect Mysterio to be such a joke in Spider-Man 2, but alas. Upon meeting Mysterio, his oversized health bar may seem threatening, but he's ultimately defeated with one punch. He also doesn't offer that much of a threat, merely standing around and yelling at Spider-Man as opposed to fighting. 343 Guilty Spark, Halo 3. After an epic campaign spanning 3 games that saw players surviving full-scale wars, bombing runs, and Halo rings threatening to end the universe, 343 Guilty Spark as the final boss was terrible. Though he makes a decent, if very non-villainous boss, Guilty Spark is just so weak that he makes Destiny 2's Gaul look like the Nameless King. He can barely hit anything and fails to dodge your attacks. It's just boring. El Gigante, Resident Evil 5. El Gigante may seem big and hulking, but he's not all that tough. Gigante must simply be shot and its parasite sliced. It's a beginning fight, but we felt a lot more fear having to deal with the chainsaw men littered throughout the game. Malice, Shadow of the Colossus. As the final Colossus and the largest of the bunch, Malice had a fair bit of hype behind him. He seems powerful enough that you need to dodge attacks to get near him. After that though, he's just a glorified jungle gym. Yes, there are points to trigger with your arrows, but Malice is more tedious than anything else. Not exactly the epic climactic battle we expected from the 16th Colossus. Old King Cole, Banjo TOOIE. Old King Cole possesses some interesting conditions while fighting, namely that the fight must be finished before the heat is turned up and our heroic duo suffocate. There's also the fact that he must be broken down piece by piece to win. You could also just stay a safe distance away and shoot him with eggs. Ice eggs will do even more damage, and thus the fight ends quickly. Alright then. Gary, Bully. Despite being outright insane and the final boss, Gary is like many a real-life bully, ultimately no tougher than everyone else. He doesn't do all that much fighting and blocks most of your attacks. At this point, you might as well be a Super Saiyan with your moveset, and it's arguably tougher to fight the other kids in Bullworth because they're much less passive than Gary. The Leader, the Incredible Hulk SNES. The Leader is one of the Hulk's most terrifying enemies in the comics, but in the Incredible Hulk on the SNES in Genesis, he can be defeated with one uppercut. You might be thinking, but wait, clearly that makes so much sense since the Hulk is so strong. Sure, but even if you're playing as Bruce Banner, one shotgun blast is enough to end the so-called hyper-intellectual. CYBERDEMON, Doom 3. The good news is that the CYBERDEMON is the final boss in Doom 3. That's pretty much it for the good news. The CYBERDEMON is so easy, it's insulting. Not only does the Soul Cube, your most powerful weapon, immediately hit it when charged, but dodging its slow, infrequent rockets is incredibly easy. Its stomp is probably the most threatening attack, but even that's easy to avoid if you're far enough. General Grievous, Star Wars Battlefront 2. If you thought Revenge of the Sith did a bad job at presenting General Grievous as a badass, then Star Wars Battlefront 2 in 2005 has it beat. Grievous is pretty powerful with his 4 arms and lightsabers. However, he's also slow and can be shot at from a range, easily. It's the least threatening 4-armed cyborg you've ever seen. From a distance, that is. LUCAN/ALASTAIR, The Order 1886. The boss fight with LUCAN/ALASTAIR, the all-important Lycan and former comrade of Galahad, starts with a quick-time event and only goes downhill from there. It basically descends into Galahad fighting him with a knife, triggering a few more quick-time events and then winning. Anticlimactic and disappointing? Well, yes, that pretty much defines The Order 1886 in a nutshell. Professor Nakayama, Borderlands 2 Sir Hammerlock's Big Game Hunt. For all of the effort it takes to reach Professor Nakayama, it's pretty comical that he loses most of his health by falling down the stairs. At that point, you can finish him off rather quickly. While it's definitely anticlimactic for many players, despite there being a huge boss fight beforehand, the whole point of Sir Hammerlock's Big Game Hunt was to show how big of a loser Nakayama was. This was just the cherry on top. ALDUIN, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Have you ever fought any dragons in The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim? Good, then you're ready for ALDUIN. He's a dragon, the destroyer of worlds, and capable of eating Nord warrior souls, but one shout renders him mortal and incapable of movement. Not only that, but you get a few Nord warriors who will distract him and take all of his damage, allowing you to safely pelt him with stealth archer shots from a distance. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.